In this video, I want to cover digital downloads as they relate to one of the complete shopping cart plugins we're going to look at later called WooCommerce. But I wanted to put it here in the digital downloads area because each of these shopping carts handles these. And in WooCommerce, I'm just going to show you screenshots of these. We have a digital downloads area where you can choose some factors right up front for the whole site. Now, force downloads, there's a lot of options here if you're having problems with the URL being generated. Most of the time, you're not going to have to deal with this, but there are some options there for you. Access restrictions. Now, these are all default settings here. Must be logged in to download files. Well, of course, if you've got guest shopping set up, you don't want to have that. So unless you've got some particular need to restrict it only to logged in people, then that's what you'd need to do. In other words, they couldn't use their link in their email unless they were logged in. Now, access restrictions here for granting before or after payments. By default, it's after payment occurs. And we're going to see that in some of the emails we look at later. But you could take this off and allow people to download before their payment has been processed. And finally, the limitation on quantities. Now, this is site-wide, but you can override that on individual products. Right now, it's saying limit the purchasable quantity to 1. Now, what's interesting here is that you can't change this number. You couldn't change the limit, but you can on individual products. But site-wide, by default, it's limited to 1. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the adding of products here. And you'll notice that we end here at dimensions under the kind of shipping options that we need here, the weight and the dimensions. We haven't checked off downloadable. As soon as we check off downloadable, you can see the checkbox there. Now we get a whole section here where we can upload a file. Then we have to give it its limit. Okay, how many times can they re-download it? And does it have an expiry date? Now, by default, these don't have an expiry date. So let's say you set the permissions. Typically, you're going to want to set the permissions level to 1 in terms of how many they can download. So you set this to 1, and then the expiry, you could leave it at never. And so until they choose to, they can download it any time. Or you could say you've got 1 day to do it, 2 days, whatever you want to set it to. Now, one thing to be careful of when you're uploading a file here and you get the regular media uploads pop-up window from WordPress, you go through all the regular items and then it's uploaded. Then it has to say under link, it must show the full URL to the file. If it doesn't show that and you click insert into post, you'll get nothing here and it won't work. You won't get the file. Now, the file will be there. It'll be in the gallery for this particular product, but it won't show up here. So you must have link showing the full URL before you hit insert into post. Okay. One other thing to be aware of, if you have variations, so in this case, I've added a product variation of size. I mean, obviously you wouldn't be doing that for a downloadable product, but whatever the variation is, you have to have a separate downloadable file. And when you check this off here, you're going to get these 2 little boxes down here. Again, the file path URL, and how many can they download. You'd have to do this for every single variation that you've got. It won't pick up the general downloadable file for the product. All right, so that's something to keep in mind if you're using some sort of variation system. Could be like with photographs, different levels of photographs. Each one has to say downloadable with its own path and everything down here. Okay, so let's say somebody's bought something. They've bought a product, okay? They get this email, is the one thing they get. Now, for a downloadable product, I'd like to see a little bit more here to tell us, hey, we're going to be sending you the link when your order processes. Remember, we set in our general settings by default, you cannot download a product until your payment completes. Well, in this case, we're waiting for the payment to complete, but it doesn't really tell us much. As someone who's ordered a download product, it doesn't tell us that right in the email. The other thing to keep in mind is you get a thank you page, of course, after you've made your order. And on that thank you page, you might be expecting to get a download link. Again, if the customer doesn't know, probably be good to put something somewhere that says, hey, you're only going to get your download once the payment's been processed. So this link right here is not to the product, it's to the product page. This is not your download link here. In fact, in WooCommerce, you don't have a download link on a thank you page ever. It comes through the email. All right, so let's go look at the order that's come in here. And what you're going to see is now that the order has come in, now that it has been processed, you actually have product permissions for the download. And it will tell you how many times it's been downloaded here, which is very handy. So let's go over to here, and now the order has been processed. You get your download link. You go and download it. And I've actually set the download limit on this product to 2 items. Now watch what happens here. Now you'll notice the item's been downloaded 2 times. Now I told you I've set it to 2. You'll look up here and you happen to see a custom field here that says download permissions granted. This will always say 1 if you've checked off that box under settings that says limit site-wide to 1 download. Okay, this is actually relating to the site-wide, not to this particular product. I find that a little bit confusing because it just happens to show up here right near downloadable product permissions. Anyway, our limit was 2 times. I tested it out, and in fact, when I tried the 3rd time, you do get this message. So that security element does seem to be working. You set the number of downloads they can have. You can also set the expiry time. They've got, 1 day, 2 days. By default, they have forever to choose it. But if you want to set an expiry date, you can. And once they reach their limit, this is the message they will get. So that's all about WooCommerce and how it handles downloadable products.